Okay, so let's do a quick disclaimer. By recording this video, do you, Kate Hodel, agree to allow your likeness, endorsement, and interview to be used in various social media posts and on YouTube?
I do.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm excited to talk to you today. I love your energy so far. And before we talk about Generations Deep, why don't you tell our listeners and viewers just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have been working with entrepreneurs for a number of years, and I've been in marketing and communications and done some book work. And it turns out that I'm Genia's two doors down neighbor at Lake of the Ozarks. And when she started talking about the book, I said, let me read it, let me edit it. I can copy edit it for you. And so she did, which was great fun. I so enjoyed reading what she had to say.
Oh, wow. That's pretty awesome. Editor. That's some real
Well,
talent.
copy editor.
Okay. Yeah. Good. That's
I
great.
catch all the commas that are in the wrong places. Or the
Perfect.
Yeah.
So in terms of the book Generations Deep, I'm just curious to start with some of the key takeaways that you thought about and came up with after reading the book.
So I think the first thing that really struck me was that notion that it's possible to accept and acknowledge both the good and the not so good that might have happened in your birth family, in your past, that you don't have to sort of go, it was all awful, or, oh, it was all, roses and sunshine and lollipops and rainbows. But it can be both, and that it's okay to think my parents were fabulous, but there were a few things that, were not as helpful to me as they could have been. And being able to acknowledge that and then deal with it, I think was probably the biggest takeaway for me. I think the other piece that I love, though, because of my own faith, is this notion that, the faith and therapy, that it's not an either or proposition, but that they can work hand in hand. I've always heard that, work as if everything depends on you, pray as if everything depends on God. And I think that approach to, I have therapy work, cognitive work I can do, but then I also can pray and trust that God will help me do that kind of work. And I think Gina captures that whole notion really well in this book.
Yeah, those are really good. I think there is a lot of wisdom in sitting inside of the tension of the doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like that pendulum swing doesn't have to be on one side or the other. We tend to live in a very black and white society sometimes. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point.
To find comfort in the discomfort, and to not try to rush over it. And again, I think Gina talks about that, to gloss over the discomfort so that you can jump back to, okay, I feel good again, but to give yourself permission to sort of be in that kind of unhappy spot long enough to acknowledge. She's got a couple of examples of things that she's like, okay, I don't have to do it that way all the time. I can actually stop and do it a different way and then see how that makes me feel.
Right. Yeah, I think her points about implicit versus explicit memory really drive that home, because even if you do decide to gloss over it, you're still carrying that inside. Yeah. Was that a unique concept for you to think about?
Not unique, but I think, again, her story is just incredible to me because it so exactly illustrates some of these critical points about working through the traumas in your life, and makes it so understandable and real because of what she went through. I mean, it's almost like a textbook, but in a...
Sorry.
No, that's okay. My husband may walk down too. It's almost like a textbook, but it's not textbooky. But I mean, the way her story just illustrates all those critical points is just amazing to me.
Yeah, I found her story to be so incredibly vulnerable.
Yes,
that
she's so brave.
She is so brave, and yet I find myself thinking, why is that so brave? Like, that we can just be honest with why is that so hard for us? Why is it so hard for us in our culture?
Yeah, because we see on television and on Facebook that everything is perfect, and nobody has any problems, and I'm off if my life isn't wonderful, and that is so not true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not true, is it?
And we do our kids such a disservice when we make them think that it's all about how it looks. So
Yeah.
the right house, the right car, the right clothes, the right hair, the right stuff, and that we think that projecting that image is what's important. That makes me crazy, that whole approach. And I live in a fairly affluent part, and you see people all the time. It's like, really? Is that what's important? But when you really get to know people, you find out that underneath all that, it's not like that. It's not all sunshine and roses. That we used to, I was in a retreat group. We used to say, nobody had the pink bedroom. I mean, we all think that everybody grew up in this beautiful life with this pink bedroom, and everything was all happy all the time. Nobody had the pink bedroom. Some of us had worse experiences than others, and certainly Gina's story illustrates some of the most horrific things that someone can go through. But everybody has some of that. Everybody probably has a little bit of shame. Everybody has some things that didn't go as well as they wanted them to. And I think this book, at whatever level you are, can help you sort of think through some of those things. So as you said, you can sort of let it go, come to grips with it, acknowledge it, and then not have it be part of you if you don't want it to be.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on what Gina had to say about being never being too late to be a cycle breaker?
Oh, yeah. I thought this book was such a message of hope that yes, it's it never too late. I mean, it's a never ending story, right? And so when somebody's story ends, then somebody else's story. And so we can change the story for our children and our grandchildren and our children's children, even if we might not be able to change the story for our parents or our aunts and uncles, or the people who came before us. So I think that's such a message of hope, that no matter how broken you are, no matter what might have happened in your past, it doesn't have to define your future. And God can work with whatever you bring to the table, whatever you're willing, as you said, to be open and vulnerable about. And again, Gina's story so illustrates that once she was willing to open herself up to that amazing love, that there was God willing to put all kinds of interesting things in her life.
Yeah.
I always tell my kids, if you look for bad, you will surely find it. If you look for good, you will surely find it. God is always working in everything. You just have to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that often too, even when I just look at people around me, if I take time to just stop and notice every individual in the moment and think, what's their story? They have one. What's their story? And Gina's book really helped me to stop and just notice, look in eye to eye with people, and wonder, just think in wonder on what.
And give people a break, because you just don't know what anybody's dealing with on a given day. And so because they may be short with me, or I don't know what they're going through or dealing with. And so just to have the grace to say, wow, so sorry your day's like that. I don't have to go with you and be, angry or whatever, but I can acknowledge that, there may be things going on that I have no idea.
Yeah. So from your perspective, then, what kind of message would you give to someone who is struggling in shame and is fearful to share their story?
I think I would say that by, sort of the truth will set you free, that by being able to trust, and that's so hard for folks who've been through trauma, but to begin to learn to trust and to begin to open themselves up and to look as honestly as they can at what's gone on, so that they can begin to make sense of it. I mean, if you, and I think again, Gina's story, some of it she didn't want to look at, some of it she didn't know. And so if you have missing pieces, so being able to it's like trying to work a jigsaw puzzle with only part of the stuff. So if you either are, not dealing with it or you don't know it, then you're trying to assemble your life with a missing set of pieces. And so being honest and open and brave, I'll use that word again, because I do think it takes some bravery to look at yourself, whether you do it with someone else or just, with your journal, and be really honest about, so why did I do that? What was behind that? Okay, I'm not a bad person, but what I did might not have been as good as I wanted it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of bravery, I always think about it takes some level of fear to be brave in the first place,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So with her being willing to open to share her story, that fear is often rooted in a form of rejection.
Mhm.
And what I found as I read her story is I felt closer and closer to her and wanted to know her more and wanted to grow closer to her. And I thought, this is just one story of one person. And if we all would just work to connect more deeply,
Mhm.
how much richer might life be? I mean, I feel richer just having read Gina's story and the vulnerable pieces of it,
Mhm.
that make me want to know her even more than I do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all want to be loved. And I think that when we are children, if the adults around us don't act like adults
Mm-hmm.
and don't love us the way we need to be loved, then I think we spend the rest of our lives trying to figure out how do I get that? How do I get what I need? And if I don't love myself and if I don't acknowledge that God loves me, then it's going to be really hard for me to figure out a healthy way to have that happen. And again, that just plays out in Gina's story. The adults around her were not being adults. They were not giving her the kind of protection that she deserved and that she needed.
Yeah. And yet you saw her level of compassion for their story and
Oh
where
my
they
gosh,
came
yes.
from. So you, at every turn of the page, I found myself rooting for every person because of
Mm-hmm.
what they've endured.
Well, that's another great point. There's not good guys and bad guys in these
Mm-hmm.
stories. It's not that these are monsters. These are just people who are ill-equipped to be the adults in the story. They had their own things which goes back to the whole, but you can stop it right now and
Mm-hmm.
change it going forward, so you don't have to continue to be caught in those crazy circles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so if you were to recommend the book Generations Deep to anyone, who would you recommend it to and why?
So clearly, I think almost anyone would benefit from reading this book. I would probably recommend it to, well, and clearly people who have trauma, but aside from that, I would recommend it to people who have children who are in the middle school, teenage years. Because what I found myself thinking about, as much as my own past, was how is my parenting looking?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of example am I giving to my children?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of environment am I creating for them? Is it what I want it to be?
Mm-hmm.
Am I helping them acquire the tools they're going to need to move out and be the kind of strong, independent young people I want them to be? And so I think, having this kind of reflection on sort of that whole generations and cycles can really help a person think about, so how am I setting up the next generation? Even if I don't have a great big thing to deal with of my own, it can still be amazingly beneficial to think about, so what am I doing for my own children?
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess is there anything else that you can think of that you wanted to share in today or about the book, or anything that stuck out to you that didn't come out in the questions?
The only other thing I would say is I found the book so interesting because the science, the epigenetics piece was fascinating. That was a whole new piece for me. And yet the way she writes is so accessible. It's so understandable.
Mm.
And the way she weaves it with her own story makes it so clear what's going on. And so it's not always easy to take scientific data and relate it to your own life. And she made that really, really easy. So I would say that she has made the book incredibly accessible for people to think about, how do I do this kind of work?
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Well, thanks for your time. It's been fun connecting
Thank
with
you.
you and
Absolutely.
learning. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Hey, take care, Tiffany.
Okay.
Thank you.